We're live.
Sweet.
Hey, we're live, Tony.
I'm always live.
Curtis, you're up.
You get dug out of your driveway?
I did. I was out snowblowing just now.
Oh,
no.
Nice.
Snow blower.
Here's what I'm going to do. I usually rock it out here, drop a nice intro, but Neme's fired up, man. I love it. So, Neme, you head it off here, man.
Hit it off with what?
Start the show. We're on a show. It's a live show.
We're talking LTL. This isn't my show. I just agreed to come on because DJ begged me. But I guess we'll start off with Curtis. You're the guest. Curtis, introduce yourself. Plug your company.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for having me on. Good to meet up with you here this fine Thursday evening. And my name's Curtis Garrett. I've been in and around the LTL industry for 12, 13 years now. Spent the first half of my career at Old Dominion, mainly up in Columbus, Ohio, in their hub or break bulk up there, and did quite a few things. Did some dock operations, did a driving school, actually drove some P&D and line haul for a little bit. And then got into weights and inspections, which kind of piqued my interest on the pricing and costing, yield management side of things for LTL carriers. So after a few years in W&I, went down, kind of started asking enough questions I probably annoyed our VP of pricing, Todd Poland, and he just said, come on down here to North Carolina and we'll set you up in the costing department. And I spent a couple years there. So loved my time there, worked with a lot of great people, learned from a ton of good people, very smart people. Still keep in touch with a lot of them. And then in 2016, jumped over to the 3PL side of the industry with a smaller 3PL in Greensboro called Sync Logistics, and spent a couple years there. I only left there because I had a unique opportunity. A friend of mine had an education technology company where he retrofitted 20-foot shipping containers and turned them into technology labs with 3D printers and all kinds of equipment that a lot of,
Awesome.
Poor school districts couldn't have in-house. So he was taking those around the country, specifically in the Southeast, and he had a big, expensive transportation problem. So I jumped in and helped him start up an in-house hotshot trucking company. And the idea was, have the equipment to move around. The company was called Beta Box, so that move around their equipment.
Isn't that wine?
What's that?
Isn't that wine?
Something box, yeah. And then, when there was downtime, because these units would be at schools and events for a few days at a time, then go off and kind of pick up other freight and haul it. So turning a big expensive transportation cost into, subsidizing that and bringing in basically another revenue stream. So did that for a little bit, and then ended up where I'm at now, which is Recon Logistics, going on almost 3 years here. And Recon is, if I started my own 3PL, this is how I would do it. It's LTL focused, very transparent. We do a lot of the things that most 3PLs do, but there's a few differences. Like we don't try to be the middleman. We're coming at it from more consultation, advisory side of things. So everything's transparent. They know, our customers know what we charge them. They know what the carrier's charging them. And then we've got, for a company our size, we've got our own TMS that we've completely built out with in-house development and whatnot. So that's kind of, for a mid-sized 3PL these days, I think that's pretty unique. So
Yeah, it is.
Great question, Curtis. So when you say like you're not a middleman, but you also mentioned that you were like upfront about costs. I mean, technically you are a middleman, right? Because you're making money off the shipment. You're just being more upfront. I just want to make sure I get that.
Technically, yeah. I mean, when I say that, I mean, we promote, we're open to direct shipper carrier relationships. If they've got a rep they like using locally, we're not going to step in and get protective and say, hey, this is our client now, back off. So just, I think in the LTL world, that's a better way to work it, because, there's only, there's a limited number of LTL carriers. Obviously everybody's been connected to a shipper at some point. So better to kind of have that triangle of, they've got the capacity, the client has the freight, obviously, and then we have kind of the technology and the expertise and that sort of thing. So
no, it's perfect. Yeah, I get that. Like, so it's funny as you say that. You definitely working for a 3PL. Throughout my career, there's definitely I always say is most 3PLs, at least the ones like worth knowing about, have those core relationships with certain LTL carriers where it's like, hey, if they have this much volume, you can't go at like me, the 3PL sales rep, can't go after it, or vice versa. But you do see in this industry a lot of back soliciting, which obviously is not good for anybody. So
right.
I like that.
Yeah, we're just open. We don't want to disrupt any good relationships in place. So if we come into a client, and they sign with us based on our tech and our pricing expertise and our operational team, great. But if they want to keep working through their own rep, we're not going to disrupt that. So it's kind of a balance. At the end of the day, a lot of the LTL carriers kind of throw every third party in the same bucket anyways, to some extent. So we are set up with most carriers as just a regular 3PL, go through the national account rep.
Meaning like blanket rates?
No, just meaning, a national account rep who, that's our point of contact. He or she can go, deal with issues in any region. They're not tied to like a specific terminal.
I got you.
What are the advantages of using someone like you versus me calling up YRC, XPO, Holland, whoever in my town?
Well, obviously you'd have to call up several of them, assuming you're not going to go with just one LTL carrier. So we are aggregating those carrier connections and relationships, from a tech standpoint into our system, from a obviously relationship standpoint. So a lot of shippers want, one primary point of contact.
Do you get volume discounts where that, like, let's say I can't?
So I think that's kind of an outdated 3PL play, the volume, aggregate all this business and try to get better pricing based on just volume. And I think a lot of carriers are costing out and kind of pricing each account, on their own merit. So unless you're one of the guys that depends on your blanket rates, and then that still is volume based as far as kind of the tier, that you land, and the aggressiveness of your pricing you get at the carriers. That's not our bread and butter. We're all account specific. So we're taking our clients' data to the carriers, and negotiating pricing based on their own freight spend.
So how is that? Oops, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask is because on your customer specific pricing, right? Our carrier specific pricing. I know that in general, rule of thumb is, $20,000 a month is usually what the minimum spend is, just to go out and negotiate carrier specific pricing. Do you guys have like a minimum, or it's like, are you just going out for every account? You'll go directly to the carriers with their freight?
Yeah, that's you're in the ballpark. We've got, several smaller brokerage clients, I guess, that use our blanket pricing. And we've got that there is that option for the smaller shippers, but also kind of a fill in, if it's needed for anybody really. But yeah, typically the rule of thumb, and it differs by carrier. And honestly, it's kind of changing right now. It's going up a little bit, but typically, $100,000 to $120,000 in LTL spend is kind of the bottom as far as, do we go account specific with this? Do an RFP, try to get, 3 or 4 carriers set up with pricing, or just kind of go the blanket route?
Definitely.
Sweet. So the talking points we were going to go over today are how to classify freight correctly and identify misclassifications and fix the process to avoid overpaying, right? Everybody wants to pay less for LTL. The second one is how blurry is the line between LTL, volume, and full truckload. And then how integrating and technology in LTL can help some, hurt some, and provide scaling opportunities for others. Or do you truly know who your LTL carrier is? So on the first one, how to classify freight, we've all heard of NMFC codes, right? That's the National Motor Freight Classification Codes. There's 18 of them, from class 50, which is the most dense, to class 500, which is the least dense. This is LTL 101. Some of the factors that go into that are value of the product or service or commodity or whatever it is that you're shipping, not service. I don't know what I'm talking about. So the product that goes in there, how easy is it to be stolen? I mean, are you shipping jewelry? Are you shipping a bundle of lumber? You know, who wants to steal a bundle of lumber? Nobody. Who wants to steal a bundle of skid full of jewelry? So that's one of the factors that go into pricing. Stowability. Is your product able to be stored? Is it hazmat? Is it going to pop a hole? Will it freeze? Those are things that affect the price of your LTL shipment. Liability. Also with that value, that goes, how much is the carrier liable for by taking your shipment into their possession? And the fourth one is density. Density is the 95% of the cost of your LTL freight comes from freight density. This seems like a foreign concept, but it's actually really easy to calculate, and there's cheat sheets and charts that you can go off of. Density is a key factor. It's calculated in pounds per cubic feet. So what you do, every time you book an LTL shipment or a pickup, you have to give them the width, the length, the height, and the weight. We call them the dims, the dimensions. So weights and dims go to every shipment. You measure those all in inches. You multiply the height, the width, and the length, and then you get that gives you the total cubic inches. Then you divide that total by 1728 to give you the total cubic feet. That cubic feet then divides by the weight. That gives you a number.
So weight divided by cube gives you the density.
Right, and in cubic feet density. Yeah. So then you can look on a chart, and there's everywhere from less than 1 all the way up to 50. So like a steel coil on a skid is going to be class 50 because of the weight and the dimensions. Now, I ship some stuff that is a bimini boat cover, and it's sitting on a rack. It's literally some hollow aluminum tube, square tubing, that's bent, covered with a fabric, and it has a little actuator machine on the bottom that's electronic and some wires and some gears. It doesn't weigh much of anything. It probably weighs less than the rack it's sitting on, but it's 114 inches by 96 inches by 98 inches tall.
Ooh.
And it weighs.
I don't know if I'd say that in a public forum here. Hopefully there's no carriers watching.
So it's like an Amazon effect, right, Tony? I always look at it, it's like small parcel, right? You know, prior to, I believe, 2014, you know, you could ship out, people were shipping, you know, Amazon was shipping boxes that were, you know, taking up space of, you know, a refrigerator, but it weighed a pound, right? So it was just like, now we're going to charge you for the greater of the two. I don't believe, I know there's always been talk about if they're going to do dimensional pricing. When it came into like LTL, you probably know more about that, Curtis. But I don't think it's 100%. I mean, they're still using FAKs, right? They're not doing, I don't even really know any carriers that are really just strictly basing FAKs, or not FAKs, but the class off of dimensions.
Right. So going back to what you were saying, Tony, it all kind of boils down to LTL carriers' revenue is generated by weight and class, but their costs are more generated by space, time, and risk. Yep. So when you're talking about the different components in the NMFC items and the different classes and whatnot, you're right. There's a stowability, there's the value, the liability, you know, the density, obviously. So if it's going to take them longer to handle, you know, whether it's pickup, delivery, or cross dock, if it's going to be easier to potentially damage, if it's going to take up not necessarily just space, but kind of, play, you know, not play nice, with other freight. Like an example, a few years ago, the class was upped on when you're shipping a few doors that are kind of like a triangle on a pallet. I mean, there's no way you can put anything on top of that. You got your angles, going in. So there's a lot of air on either side. So that's typically a light pallet that, they wanted to make sure they were getting almost the highest class possible for that. Right. So you're right. It's compensating for anything that will eat up trailer space, is hard to handle. And then if damages do occur, costs quite a bit to pay up the claim and kind of replace that.
Right. But in my experience, I've seen pricing, if I call them up and say, hi, my name's Tony. I have this package going to this zip code from this zip code. Here's the DIMS. They'll tell you, it's $8,000. And then if I call back and say, I'm Tony with company XYZ, here's our account, I have this same shipment. And then they'll say, oh, well, your price is $8,000, but we're offering a 93% discount. And then you only pay, you're paying $600 for an $8,000 shipment that they invoice.
But I always say that. What's the disc? Yeah, I just think that like when people say you got a 93% discount, I always like to say is like 93% off of what, right? Like what's the base rate? What's the rate? I think what we also are forgetting is, as we, talk about pricing, accessorials are that's where they make their money, right? And I think that knowing your specific freight needs, that's when it comes into, that's where you need to, again, I think more or less looking at what you're actually doing and what you need, because you get someone that calls in and says, hey, this is the dimensions, ship it out. But yet we didn't know it needed a lift gate. We didn't know it needed an appointment on delivery. So it's like, those are going to wrap up prices.
What's the number one accessorial in LTL? What do you think?
For me, it's delivery on appointment. Appointment on delivery, just because a lot of my customers are in the food and bev.
All right, let me tell you what mine is. As a shipper, it's Reway.
I mean, I don't. What's funny is I didn't even think about that. I don't even consider that like an accessory. I just think of that as like
every single skid.
They like a Reway fee.
Skid. Yep.
A Reway fee that you're paying, or just
so let's say right. When you book an LTL shipment, however you choose to book it, whether you're making a phone call or you're booking it through a TMS system, you're going to have to put in the weight of that shipment. If you say, let's say you put your skid on the scale and it says 573 pounds, if you put 570 and it weighs on their cross dock at 580, 575, they're going to charge you a fee to reweigh it. Then they're going to up the cost because you reported it incorrect weight. And then they don't want their truck, when they put them together, to be overweight. So they need accurate weight. So you're going to still get your shipment, still going to deliver and all that stuff. But then your accessorials after the fact are going to add another 40, 50, 60, $100 just for reweigh.
Well, that's where you got to carry your scorecard. I mean, I think that will just play into, obviously, I could plug in 3PLs. That's a pro of a 3PL, right? Like figuring that out.
Yeah.
Figuring that out. But
a 3PL is going to...
How many low volume shippers don't even have a scale?
Honestly, scales and dimensioners are still non-existent on the shipper side, pretty much.
Right.
I tell people all the time.
Go ahead.
It's only been the last decade that really the LTL carriers have all gotten up to speed on that, and they all have a pretty good handle on knowing what they're hauling and how much space it takes up.
I tell people all the time to over guess your weight. If you think it's 300 pounds, put 500. I mean, they're never going to lower your rate, but if you're paying for 500 pounds, they'll never add an accessorial for the reweigh and the extra fee for the weight.
You might get charged. Can you get charged, Curtis? Like, I'm not 100% sure. Can you get charged for over? Like, if you estimated the weight to be over, you can get charged for that, right? If it was under, or no?
No, but what they can, I don't know if you guys have heard of something called bumping the weight. Sometimes people on a density rated NMFC item, they'll put the weight higher just to get down into a lower class range.
Yeah.
So carriers can sometimes do the opposite. If they reweigh something and find, say you're shipping plastic articles and it's a density rated item. If you put 500 pounds class 70 and they've reweighed it and found, hey, it's actually, 320 pounds, that'll then lower the density, which will put you into a higher class range. So
Yeah, that's even.
And that's what I'm
Excuse
that's
me.
what I did in W&I at Old Dominion, was all kinds of just, auditing and making sure what was actually shipped was matching up with what was on the BOL.
My example of the 200 pounds difference, it's usually way less than that. I was just making the point for you generally want to round up
sometimes.
Right. I've seen that too.
Yeah.
But generally, as a shipper, what you think it is, you want to round up to the next highest round number.
So, Mike, you had a question about density-based pricing and whatnot. A few carriers have had density, like cube and density-based tariffs for a while. It's more the lack of, not ability, but the ability, I guess, for shippers to be able to, like you said, Tony, weigh and measure everything that goes out the door, So that would be available. And then there are some carriers right now that they kind of have a heavy cube component into the rate. Like ABF, for instance, it's no secret they've got a cubic minimum rule in their rules tariff. So you can rate a shipment on standard LTL pricing, but then depending on the size of it and how far it's going, they're going to have, an extra cubic min surcharge basically that gets added there.
What do you think is the acceptable, not acceptable, what do you think is the average loss rate or damage rate on LTL shipments? That's a loaded question because I have some more coming after that. What do you guys think?
What's your percentage?
Like as far as the number of shipments you send out and how many of them get wrecked.
Yeah, or lost, split.
So obviously, right now, carrier performance in the last 6 to 8 months has just tanked, obviously, and nobody's doing a bad job necessarily. It's just, what's been happening in the economy and the world and all that. So recent numbers are a little skewed, I would say. Sure. Although I will, to add to that context, I would say, with performance being down, it's more the prevalence of late deliveries. It's not that damage freight has really risen a whole lot.
But what do you think the damage rate is?
I'm going to pull some numbers now on a pretty big shipper. Let me tell you.
So the other thing I would say is the way the carriers measure it is the claims ratio, they call it. Mm-hmm. And that's it's not a percentage of any sort of shipment count. It's literally just what was the revenue on that account for them, and then what was the amount in dollars that they paid out for claims. And the amount they paid out divided by the total revenue, that gives them a claims ratio. So I know for a lot of carriers, if it's anything over like 2 to 3% that they're paying out in relation to the total revenue, that's pretty alarming for them.
Yeah, that's what I've always heard is the 2 to 3%.
Your class is 500, right? You said, Tony?
In that one item, yes.
Yeah, because I honestly don't see many damages. To Curtis's point, like I think it's more or less like I have not seen this year's. I haven't seen it this bad to where it's like missed pickups, right? Usually, I always like to say give a day notice. They always say, technically the rule of thumb is 2 hours before your close time is fine. Throw that out. Yeah, in my opinion, but. Right now is, even giving that, a day, sometimes 2 days in advance, you're going to get missed pickups. I mean, at least I've been experiencing that just because of the state we're in right now.
The reason I asked the damage question is this, because I don't think a lot of shippers even understand how LTL works, right? We put it on a truck, it goes away. They take it to your delivery, right? That's what we all think it's full truckload. Now, this is probably old news to you guys too, but I have to explain this all the time to people in manufacturing, people in production, people in leadership, that you need different packaging to go across town than you need to go across country. In an LTL shipment, most of these carrier networks, this LTL, I love this topic because it's absolutely fascinating. There's all kinds of YouTube videos you can do about worldwide overnight shipping. Google it, I'm just dating myself there. Search it on YouTube and you will find some really interesting stuff, especially if you're a big nerd like us. But most of these LTL companies have their networks, their hubs 4 hours apart. The reason that is because many of the unions and the Teamsters wanted this 10-hour workday. So they have a half an hour to pre-trip and punch in and be assigned a vehicle and hook up their trailers. Then they go, the 4-hour route from hub to hub, work on the dock, swapping trailers or cross dock and unloading the trailers, whatever. Then coming back that extra 4 hours back to their original terminal and be a local driver. They're out and back, and they do this line haul every night, hub to hub. So you have to think, if you're shipping from Chicago to LA, how many 4-hour stops are on there? Because that's how many times your skid is going to be cross docked and handled.
Yeah, I've actually never heard that take on it, but I mean, it makes sense because a lot of companies were primarily union back in the day. I mean, they can do some pretty cool things with the meet and turns where they, one guy will leave out a drive 400 or 500 miles from his terminal, meet a guy that he's driving 400 or 500 miles from his terminal, swap trailers and go back. So that definitely helps. And then most LTL carriers have like team drivers where they'll have a sleeper truck, still pulling a set of doubles and just two people literally alternating. And I remember at Old Dominion, we had runs from Columbus, Ohio to Rialto, California, probably in, 2.5 days or something. So yeah, but
there's a lot that goes into LTL that people just don't understand. And I wanted to I pushed for this topic on the show because I just think that there's a lot of people, everybody can push stuff off the dock and onto a truck and call it in and get it gone. But do you understand the difference between loading it on a truck and getting it from point A to point B than loading it on an LTL truck that's going to go 10 minutes across town to their terminal and unload it again, put it on another line haul truck that's going to run at night over to this terminal 3 or 4 or 5, 8, 10 times, and then get out on another local guy to the final customer. And that's where you have your handling damage, your product loss. If you ship 2 or 3 skids, one may show up one day and the other 2 might show up the next day. Oh, I run into that all the time as a shipper. The customer will call and wonder where their other skid is. They got this, but not that. And they went together on one pro. It happens all the time. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, LTL is a lot more like the airline industry than it is full truckload.
Yes.
It's hubs. It's bringing in freight from these smaller areas, pooling it all in one area, getting high cube loaded trailers and sending those down the road. Because, for the LTL carriers, the largest section of their cost is the line haul piece. So, that's where space and, cube and density are the biggest factors. So yeah, they don't want to move it, more than a couple hundred miles unless it's pretty darn full.
Right.
Seems we've lost a couple people here.
Mike just texted me. He had to reboot his computer. Something, it just froze up. So he's rebooting. He's still there. TJ had to run. I mean, the freight never sleeps, even if you're in a live thing. But TJ's got a driver stuck out in the front.
Oh, really? So remind me where you're based.
I'm in Indiana, north central Indiana, South Bend. Go Irish.
Yeah.
I did not go there. I went to Purdue actually, but go Boilers. Boiler up.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to help with LTL is the difference between truckload and LTL. So I know a lot of carriers, a lot of LTL companies. What is the difference? You've heard of volume shipment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this was new to people who have been in the industry for a long time. I talked to them. They're like, what are you talking about? What's a volume shipment? And I never knew the line between LTL volume and truckload. And I had to ask people who do this every day. And what I ended up learning was it depends on the carrier, right? So carrier X might say 12 linear feet of the floor is below that is LTL, above 12 feet is volume. And pretty soon when you get into volume, you almost need a truckload anyway. Volume, it's 2 or 3 skids is about all you ever want to do. 4x4 pallets, the 48 by 44, right. However high. that's about all you want to ship LTL. Pretty soon you're in volume, and next thing you know, once you hit volume, hey, Mike's back. Once you hit volume, you're almost comparing volume shipment to a truckload shipment.
Right.
Almost.
It's a little confusing sometimes. So if you tender a shipment to an LTL carrier that's, rated off your standard LTL pricing, it can potentially qualify for some of these, rules that they have in the rules tariff, like a cubic capacity, a linear foot, a capacity loads. Some of them call it different things. And that's kind of what you're referring to, I think, with over 12 feet, under 12 feet for certain carriers. And you're right. If it's over, for example, a common cubic capacity or low density type rule is if you have 8 pallets that are basically floor to ceiling, that's going to be roughly 750 to 800 cubic feet. If those pallets are light enough, the total weight that it puts the density under 6 pounds per cubic foot, it can qualify for this low density rule, which they'll then take the total cube, say it's 800 cubic feet, they'll multiply that by 6, and that new number is now your weight, your calculated weight. And that gets rated at, it depends on the carrier, but a lot of them use like a class 125 rate based on that new calculated weight. So that's definitely the danger in giving more than 4 to 5 pallets to an LTL carrier, standard pallets, without kind of having a good knowledge of their rules tariff and what those extra rules are.
This is why nobody understands LTL.
But then for a volume rate, for years and years and years, if you call up an LTL carrier and say, hey, I want a volume or a spot quote, based on their current capacity and needs and network at that time, they're going to give you, for the amount of linear feet that you tell them, they're going to give you a quote, and you take it to the bank. They'll charge you for it. As long as you are not over that feet that you gave them, it's good to go. So that's been around forever. And you can ship, 30 feet worth of trailer space if you want to pay for that. And they'll give you a price, and they'll generally take it, in normal times, I guess. But
right.
The problem is, on a service standpoint, you may save a little money going, sending 3/4 of a van on an LTL trailer. You're not going to like the service, the transit times and whatnot, because that's going to be the last shipment they move. It makes sense too. If they have a trailer with 25 shipments on it that are all 1 to 4 pallets each, they're going to move that first on their line haul schedule. They're not going to risk upsetting 25 customers as opposed to this one large volume shipment over here.
Right.
So they would rather see those, those smaller, heavier, more load friendly type shipments. And obviously that's why they exist, is, to haul those and not charge you for the whole trailer's dedicated trailer for it. But yeah, technically you can give larger shipments. It's not a good idea. It's always a good idea to get a price and see, because maybe it's a backhaul lane for them, and maybe they are offering something decent as far as the cost there, but you're not going to get the A to B transit time that you would with something dedicated.
Right.
So,
all right.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay. But it is overly complicated.
It is. It's too complicated for the normal shipper. You're on mute, Mike. I thought that was hashtag 2020.
Got to reboot his mic too.
Yeah, no kidding. So the other topic I wanted to talk about, I know you guys both offer this in your companies, the TMS system. So how many ways is there to book a load, right? So I've used several different technologies and phones and fax machines back in the day.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
Am I good?
a lot of them. Yeah, there you are.
Nice.
So I've used systems where they're integrated into our ERP, I can hit tender and it goes. And based on the weights and dims, it's going to go through some waterfall, some algorithm, and it figures out who's going to get it and set prices that are negotiated annually, biannual, whatever. So there's that. I've seen stuff where you book it, it's EDI, you forget about it. I've seen, here's my shipment. I have the dims that I wrote down because I went out there and had a tape measure and a scale. And then I pick up the phone and I start calling my favorite guy that comes in, because this dude wears sunglasses and shorts 24/7, 365. We got a foot of snow and he's wearing shorts when he comes in the shop to pick up his freight. Or the dude that I hang out with on the weekend who pulls for local LTL company, the guy that's easiest to deal with regardless of price. I know that happens all day, every day. They go to the easiest one. Shippers go to that guy that they know because it's easy. And sometimes if your TMS doesn't choose for you, you're losing out a lot of money on LTL freight. I've used RateLink, Swanleap, proprietary.
Not bad.
All right, proprietary stuff. There's a million different services out there, and some of them are great, some of them are garbage. And at the end of the day, if you book something afternoon, call them anyways, because you're gonna, in a normal time, especially not like now, but now you can book something at 9 a.m. and they still might not show up. But if you book anything afternoon, as a general rule, you need to call and make sure it happens. Go, Mike. Tell us about.
I am not going to talk about. I was going to. That's off record or offline. I wanted to ask you about someone that you mentioned, but so I mean, I guess generally your question is, I mean, I look at it like this. I mean, a TMS is great, right? But so not every 3PL has it. I'm not sure, Curtis, if you guys have it, but like a general like cloud, I call it a cloud-based TMS, right? So say for instance, you know, even larger shippers, right? They don't have sometimes they don't have an ERP system and they're still doing things pretty manually, right? Even they utilize 3PLs that have a cloud-based TMS to where it's like they could just jump on one website, one portal, and you know put in the shipment order, and then get a list of carriers that are going to be, I would say, my blanket rates, right? And then whatever margin I mark up on it, right? Utilizing that, right? And then again, then there's more like integrated stuff to where it's like you have an ERP system and your ordering process, is pretty manual because okay, you get a PO that kicks into your ERP, but now what? Now you're having to email if you don't have a TMS and you don't have a TMS that is like integrated into your ERP, you're basically getting that PO, whoever's getting those POs, getting that emailed over to you, and then you're still doing a manual process. So I think obviously it's all situational, but outside of, the cloud-based TMS for, what I would say is most shippers could utilize that. The integration with TMS and 3PLs, I think I don't want to say we're all the same, but essentially we are all the same. I think we're all the same to where it's like, hey, listen, it's what we do. It's the company are we going to be proactive? Are we looking at, hey, what kind of business rules do we want to put in place? Because let's face it, I've walked into companies that have, a TMS that don't have any type of business rules put in place. It's basically, they think that, hey, we got a TMS and now we just have the best rate. We're rate shopping everybody. And little do they know is, their shipping department is still picking more expensive carriers when they should have picked, the lower cost carrier because they don't have any type of, again, business rule. So, I mean, I could go days on this, but.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. There could be a whole course or a whole call just on TMS and load selection. I think at the end of the day, a lot of the off-the-shelf systems that have gotten pretty cheap for anybody to buy, whether you're a 3PL or shipper, to your point, Mike, they are a lot similar. Companies like us that we develop our own in-house, and a lot of that has been driven by customer needs and our best practices, what we feel is important. But yeah, there's so many variances. I mean, we go into shippers that are paper logs, spreadsheet based, literally just carrier routing based on what their customer wants. And I think any system that kind of aggregates all the options there, is connected with all the different LTL carriers, to give you all that tracking info, the current rates, even documents, the POD and whatnot can be pulled back in. I mean, I think you're just saving so much time and money there by having that at your fingertips. And then, that I still believe in giving the shipper some choice, but just showing them the options and showing them why, show them performance by lane, show them performance by carrier, show them the cheapest, the most expensive, kind of have them, because not every shipment's the same. Sometimes they do want to put it, on a top tier carrier, and sometimes they are okay with the transit time being a day or two longer. And it just, there's so many variances. So
I think that Tony, I love you, but I think that giving you shouldn't always be looking for price, right? I think that it goes into saying it's like, hey, say it's your CFO or whoever maybe.
Absolutely.
You need to have, again, I'm sure shippers don't want to sit there every day and have to quote out, even if you do have a TMS, right? I think that it's upon, the 3PL you use and your executive leader, hey, have a quarterly meeting to measure, hey, these are the metrics, the KPIs we want to see. We want to make sure that you're holding true to your promise. This was our budget. We hit our budget and we're good to go, versus having to, every single shipment worry about the cheapest shipment, the lowest cost shipment. I mean, that just gets tiring, right? And then essentially if you're not having any type of, meeting, and I would say CFO, if you're not having a type of meeting with that CFO to go over to make sure that you're in fact, picking the lowest cost carrier, or, you are in fact, hitting your budget, it's really, you're still shooting from the hip, right? It's like, you have to have a strategy and a plan, and that starting, we're talking about pricing. What's your plan? Is it to strictly never have a sit down, or a let's say monthly sit down to look over your transportation budget to see if you're, hitting your mark? Or is it, we're just going to look for the cheapest rate, lowest rate, whether that's through our TMS or manually? I just don't see that process ever being scalable. But that, again, I'm biased.
I never pick the lowest rate unless it's the carrier I want it on.
at the end of the day, it's still the cost, right? It's just whether it's that upfront freight rate, or is it the costs involved with higher damages, or, late shipments, or God forbid.
There's so much.
What about guaranteed? Tell me about guaranteed. Do you throw a guarantee on there, or is that the Tommy Boy reference? I can put a guarantee on a box without you.
I mean, you could pay extra for a guaranteed. I think we were talking, me and Curtis were talking about it earlier, but obviously with things, let's put aside what's going on in the industry right now, and some carriers aren't even offering guarantee, but all guarantee basically
carriers aren't even offering pickups.
Yeah, I mean, guarantee basically covers you for the shipment if again, you're going to pay extra money, and if that shipment doesn't get there on time when it said it was supposed to get there on time, I believe that you get your money back. I never had too many customers have done it. So
yeah, that's
stuff all the time, and I really only believe that only puts it in the back of the trailer.
You're accurate there. I mean, what a guarantee or any elevated service level does on the LTL side is it just creates more visibility on that shipment. They wrap it with the guaranteed tape. Everyone on the dock at all times knows where those guaranteed shipments are, and it's going to make it on the next schedule out, right? But ironically, you're right about the last little bit of the trailer, so it's right there ready to unload at the next terminal and get on the next trailer out. But they've done studies, and a lot of carriers have found most of their damages occur in the last 10 feet of the trailer as well. So I
never heard of that. I'm going to use that.
That's true.
Typically, it's just human psychology, I guess. You're getting down, you're trying to finish that trailer off, fill it up, get it closed down on the road. You're, maybe working a little hastier than when you're kind of building the front half of the trailer and loading stuff in nicely. So, but yeah, I guaranteed right now is you can pay for it. It's still available. You're still going to get higher visibility on that shipment, but with current conditions, a lot of carriers have opted out from doing, the reimbursement if it doesn't.
Also,
make it
thanks
on time.
Amazon for ruining tracking for everyone in sales, because now every customer and every salesperson wants that tracking number off of every shipment before it's ever left the dock or the yard or wherever, and they want to know what truck it's on and where it's at. And
Tony, you can tie. I mean, if you want to talk about integration or technology or automation, I mean, there's ways to go about that. If you have the customer's email, where it's like as soon as you book that, you could literally kick that email over to your customer. And is it going to, like completely stop customers or salespeople calling you? Hell no. But it's definitely going to mitigate it. Like, I think that's a big thing. But
so
again,
there's something in the LTL world called ASNs, automated shipping notice. And basically once a shipment's booked, you'll have like an email with a PDF sent to the end customer, tell them the carrier it's on, the pro number, kind of some guidelines for, receiving it properly and who to contact if there's damage and whatnot. So yeah,
I tie myself to all my, like, and I'm on the sales side, right? But I always want to know I'm probably should learn how to delegate a little bit more, but like, I'm always like, I make sure that I like go internally and tie myself into that account. Cause I want to just know again, if there's any issues, right? So
every ASN I've ever used is ERP generated. So when I create the paperwork for the shipment, it generates the ASN to the customer, to the salesman, to whoever you send it to. The problem with that is the ASN doesn't necessarily have the pro number, which is the tracking portion.
Oh, well, then that's easy.
The pickup. It doesn't happen until the pickup. When the pickup guy gets there, he's putting on his sticker.
Oh, yeah. You can't get the pro number without the pro number doesn't come until after you scan it.
You can do like advanced electronic pros. So as soon as you tender a shipment to a carrier, you can pull a pro number back in.
Right there, and there's some of that too. We can. I know we have a carrier that's with a parked trailer, and we load it every day with drop shipments, and every one of them has a tracking number that we put on it. So I know the tracking number on some of these before they're ever loaded on the truck.
Right.
There's so much stuff.
There's a big initiative in the LTL industry right now to get the electronic bill of lading kind of standardized and up and running. And there's actually something called LTL Digital Council that's kind of a conglomerate of different tech companies and carriers, and I think some shippers and 3PLs as well. And they're all kind of putting their heads together and working on standardizing this. So it'd be nice if, eventually, I don't know of too many other industries where the price you pay on something is based on what you put on this piece of paper that you hand to a driver,
Right.
So it'd be nice if that was bypassed at some point.
Curtis, thanks a ton for coming on. And we really wanted to hear your expertise on all of this, but LTL makes me want to pull my hair out. That's why I keep it short enough that you can't do that. Right. Rhonda, how can you help us with that? I'm going to lay on the couch this time.
Hey, Rhonda, I feel vulnerable because I do full truckload, and I'm going to rewatch this episode probably 3 or 4 times to actually let it soak in. But how do I deal with that?
Just got to have that learning attitude. No, there was so much information, and
we probably overcomplicated it.
No, but it was really helpful.
LTL.
So
yeah, it made sense. Yeah.
But
what I got of it.
It's kind of like what Mike said, like getting down there in the weeds and checking out what's going on. And
it's just having a strategy in general. Like, I mean, there's a lot, like, it's super complicated, but it's not, right? It's like, I think it's more or less, again, having someone that, having the resources and team that actually can, again, know the ins and outs of what you're doing. And if we're just talking about LTL, building out a strategy that is going to be tailored specifically to your needs and your customers' needs, and then sticking to that.
How often do they change the rules and regulations and classes and whatnot? How often is that switched up?
They're always adding and tweaking their rules tariffs a little bit, but not a lot of fundamental changes.
The classifications never change. Rarely. They do. They're just not often.
Right. I mean, the initiative now is get pretty much everything to be density rated in some sense. So that's, I think every quarter the NMFTA has basically a hearing where they like entertain different changes that different shippers and carriers want to make, and everybody will vote on it. So there will be minor changes. You know, that's something that I try to keep tabs on, because the last thing I want is one of my customers calling me up and saying, hey, you know, what we ship isn't class 70 anymore. What the heck? So try to stay ahead of that.
Yeah, it's really fascinating though. It just sounds like a huge puzzle that you have to kind of know where all the parts are.
It is.
That's exactly, yeah. There's, you know,
if you're a shipper and you're shipping LTL, you need someone like Curtis. You need someone like Mike. You need someone that does this all day, every day to take care of it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
Agreed.
Hey, and please stop using 4 different 3PLs and carriers direct and thinking you get smoking rates.
Right.
You don't know how many times I literally will like do an analysis, and we use FedEx Freight with this 3PL, FedEx Freight with this 3PL, FedEx Freight with this 3PL, then FedEx Direct, all going to the same customer multiple times, and the rates are just like this. I'm just
Why
like,
do you think that's the case?
the case is because, again, so if you have no customer specific pricing, it's blanket rates, right? And it's essentially on the 3PL side to mark up the margin, right? But more or less, I think is why they do it. It's just, you, like I said, is you only know what you know, right? And it's no one's fault besides the salespeople on our end to explain, hey, listen, this is why it doesn't make sense to do that. I always say is, listen, whether you are, you know, have the volume for customer specific pricing or don't, either go carrier direct or focus with one 3PL when it comes into LTL. And again, I say 3PL model because there's multiple different things you get with, you know, a TMS, you know, a dedicated team, whatever that may be, right? It's just simple as that.
What if you're a supply chain guy and you came up with this idea and you're the only one to do it, but you were able to get your whole entire operation down to three carriers?
You mean three PLs?
And you're the only one to ever do it. What do you think about that, Mike?
I would just copy it and make it better.
Are we speaking of someone specifically?
Nope. Moving on. Hey, Tony, how much snow did you get up there?
16 inches roughly, somewhere in there.
Perfect.
A lot.
Nice and toasty here. I got shorts on.
Hey, so do I.
Hey,
It's 73 and sunny in here.
Well, here's what I wanted Ron, I think you can touch on this. So right now, I'm dealing with a lot of people that are very, very stressed out. You know, it's kind of weird. You've got the people that have like the regular accounts that are just, you know, dying to find trucks or carriers or anything, and they don't know how to talk to their customers about it or how to let them know, or, you know, sometimes they don't want to even. And then you got the other end, you know, our expedite team who's just blowing up. I mean, making a ton of money, you just going right and left, but they're still like just worn out. I mean, to the point, I mean, just because of this storm here, throw some suggestions out there for some of them. I mean, I kind of coach from the, you know, operations and how to handle that side of things, but just from the mental standpoint.
Well, it would start from, you know, with leadership, make sure they're communicating and checking in with your team and kind of noticing, kind of doing like a buddy check with one another. Because not all of us are going to speak up for ourselves, right? And we don't want to disappoint anybody, particularly if we have a passion for what we're doing and we really care, which all of you do. So I could see how it's kind of hard to pull back and step away and practice some self-care. But in the long run, if you think about it, if you're not getting enough sleep, you're not eating right, you're trying to put out multiple fires, we only have so much energy, so much time in a day. And sometimes we might start missing things. So it's just kind of having one another's back, really. And those people that are very emotional, you know, acknowledge, like you've done, TJ, acknowledge their emotion and just give them pep talk and, you know, support them the best you can. So it's really, you know, I'm hearing that as well. So we just did something as simple as like some breathing exercises and recommending people just step away for a while, power off, pass the workload on to someone else for a little while, even if it's for like 10 or 15 minutes. So, you know, just checking in with yourself.
Yeah, that's what we found that people that, you know, aren't taking lunches and stuff because they're buried. And so we've been trying to order lunch in for everybody now. you probably wouldn't be all that excited about what we do order in for lunch, health wise, but things like that. I mean, we've put together a kind of a lounge area. When you walk in, before you get to we own the whole building. Into our office, there's a warehouse out there, and that's where we got some ping pong tables and some pool tables. Kind of added like a lounge area with a TV and somewhere where you can just go chill out, because before, if you had an hour lunch, you could go drive to somewhere and do that, but now it's like there's been days that we didn't want people on the roads even.
Do you have a vending area as well?
Yeah, actually, our vending machine area, like it's a local lady, and she does it herself, and we can pick what we want. So there's like healthy options in there for sure.
That's what I.
You guys have headsets too?
What's that?
Do you have headsets too?
People wear them. Yeah. There's a lot of people that wear them, and they're available to everybody. I don't. I've never done it. I've never wanted to. I have the AirPod in, but that's about it.
Hey, TJ, you have an area where they can maybe do some workouts or whatever? I know in our Prescott office, we didn't have a fitness center, but we took a little room that wasn't used much and just threw a couple things in there, and people actually use it. Just as a way to
Yeah.
We got a gym at our
next step. That's our next step. So we've been using. We did one of our other directors has his dad had a forklift, so he brought it in like an old one, and so we had pallets of extra desks because we had ordered. When we moved in, and so we've kind of consolidated all that to the back. So we've got some more room, but that's our next step, is to put a workout area in.
And you don't need much. I mean, get a Peloton.
Right. You rock a Bowflex.
Love you guys, Curtis. It was great meeting you. I'll leave it on. I'm just gonna cut mine off.
He's got a sales call. So, but yeah,
I agree with the 10 minutes of breathing. That can do wonders. Just turn your chair away from the screen, close your eyes, 5 or 10 minutes, deep breaths. That kind of resets you.
Yeah, we just did a wellness webinar on Tuesday, and that was what was most requested after doing a survey of our entire team. Mostly everybody's still working remotely. I think we have maybe 6 people in the office out of maybe 400. So that's been really helpful for our team. And so I'll get on and lead it. So we did what's called 2-to-1 breathing, and then we tried some box breathing. But it really does help, because it, getting rid of breathing in some oxygen, letting off some of that carbon dioxide, and just resetting, like you mentioned.
Yeah,
it does wonders. So
yeah. All right, we're gonna try that. I know the one thing I liked about the Apple Watch. I don't wear it as much now because I get thousands of emails every day and texts. So it just drove me nuts. So I. But it used to stop. It would just start vibrating every once in a while and say, take a deep breath. I actually started doing that. I kind of like that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it maybe just seems like fluffy, but it really does work. So there's a lot of people getting into that, which is pretty cool. So
I just want to thank you guys. Curtis, man, I honestly having you on was awesome. It was like I said, I'm not going to go back and kind of rewatch this, just to kind of let it all. You talked slow enough and laid it all right out there. It's just when you don't know what it means, it sounds like it's pretty easily applicable. So go check out what Curtis is doing. Check out Recon Logistics. I mean, I'm sure Tony will be hitting him up as a top 5 shipper. He's going to want a top 5 logistics company involved. So, but yeah, we always have these recorded on the YouTube channel. Tony brought Curtis to our attention.
That was great. Thank you.
And what's cool is I've got a lot of you get connections, and you kind of know who's this. And I was kind of reaching out. I reached out to Jolly and those guys. Who do you know that's good in LTL? I just didn't know. And so this is how you get connected with more people, right? Get connected with more parts of the industry, and it just makes you that much more valuable. So try to soak it in as best you can.
Awesome. Thanks for
great coming here. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, guys.
Come back.
See you later.
Bye, guys.